On Thursday night, July 13th at 9:34 p.m., Hoover, Alabama 911 received a call from a 24-year-old woman named Carlee Russell, who stated she saw a male toddler in a diaper on the interstate. When police responded 5 minutes later, there was no sign of Carlee or the toddler. Carlee's car was left on the side of the road with her wig and personal items left inside. A search followed. Then 48 hours after disappearing, Carlee returned home. She told police she was kidnapped in a tractor trailer by a man with orange hair and a woman who fed her Cheez-Its. Police say they cannot corroborate or verify any of her allegations of what happened. This has led many to wonder, and some to accuse Carlee of taking part in a hoax. Tonight, we will look at other investigations into crimes and abductions that ended up being hoaxes. Jussie Smollett, Sherry Papini, and the disappearance of Rudy Farias. Then we'll bring in our experts to investigate why people do this, how they get caught, and what eventually happens to the hoaxsters as we continue to investigate the mysterious case of Carlee Russell. I'm Vinny Politan. Thank you so much for joining us here on Closing Arguments. Wow, through the years, we've come across quite a few hoaxes that I've covered. I mean, one of the most bizarre ones, and I was on the air for this as it was happening, was Balloon Boy. Do you remember Balloon Boy? Like, first of all, I couldn't believe this was happening, right? And I'm like, really? Like, there's a little boy in a balloon and he's flying across the country and we can't do anything and we're worried about him? It was insane, right? It was insane. And that was sort of some sort of publicity stunt or something by this very bizarre family. And the poor little kid who was supposed to be in the balloon, wasn't in the balloon, spilled the beans live on television. It was quite a scenario. But that hoax a little different than some of the other ones that we've covered, because that one, at least they weren't alleging a crime, right? They were just like, oh my goodness, the kid's in the balloon. Jussie Smollett, he was alleging a hate crime. A hate crime. I mean, with props and everything, with the noose around his neck, and he fooled a lot of people because as an actor and celebrity, you know, you come to the table, I guess, with a little bit of credibility, because why on earth would you ever make something like that up? But he did, and we saw all of that unravel in front of our own eyes. I mean, some people were skeptical from the beginning, but when people come forward, you want to give them the benefit of the doubt, right? You don't presume that people are lying, and especially when the scenarios are so strange, like with Jussie Smollett and 2 o'clock in the morning, getting a Subway sandwich. Like, where did that come from? Sherry Papini, this perhaps the most elaborate hoax ever. Almost got away with it. Most elaborate hoax ever, that she was abducted and branded, put in chains. I mean, she was all in on it. But eventually, the truth sort of bubbled out there. But again, all those resources and everything else. I mean, these are people that are making it up, making up a crime, pretending to be the victim. Now, just recently, we've had this case involving this young man, Rudy Farias, and his mother. And mother reported him missing for like 8 years, but he wasn't missing at all. Like, we're still a little confused by this one and still trying to piece it together. But from what we understand, it's like he was with his mother the whole time. Strange, like, why? How? And think about, the resources that go into the investigation and the attention that it gets, and whether you raise funds or do other things, there's attention being put on these cases that are not real cases. They're not real cases. These are people pretending to be the victim of a crime and using the resources of investigators and the goodwill of the public. And it's a shame. So For those of you not familiar with the Jussie Smollett, Jerry Papini, and the Rudy Farrier stories, we put this together for you so you get a better idea of what happened in these 3 confirmed hoaxes.
Jussie Smollett claimed he was the victim of a racist, homophobic attack at the hands of 2 white men on the streets of Chicago in 2019. Smollett claimed the men punched him, poured bleach on him, and tied a noose around his neck.
I work with an artist. I don't really want to say his name, but he stayed here. He went to Subway. He was walking by, and some guys, I don't know, they jumped him or something like that. And I just want to report it and make sure he's all right.
Do you want to take it off or anything? Yeah, I do. I just want to.
While police were investigating the alleged attack, some people questioned the validity of the actor's claims. Jussie addressed the skepticism in a press conference.
I've been truthful and consistent on every single level since day one. I would not be my mother's son if I was capable of one drop of what I've been accused of. This has been an incredibly difficult time, honestly one of the worst of my entire life. But I am a man of faith, and I'm a man that has knowledge of my history, and I would not bring my family, our lives, or the movement through a fire like this.
Chicago police found the 2 men involved in the attack, 2 Nigerian brothers who had worked with Smollett on the set of the show Empire. A month after Jussie's initial claim, he was arrested and charged with disorderly conduct and filing a false report. Smollett would take the hoax all the way to trial, where he was found guilty and sentenced to 150 days in jail.
I am not suicidal.
Stop laughing about black.
I am not suicidal.
In November 2016, California wife and mother of 2, Sherry Papini, was reported missing after going for a jog, only to miraculously reappear 3 weeks later.
At about 4:30 this morning, the Shasta County Sheriff's Office was notified that Sherry had been located. We've also learned that Sherry was released by her captor on a rural road near Interstate 5 in Yolo County. She was bound with restraints, but was able to summon help from a passing motorist who then notified law enforcement.
Sherry told police she had been abducted and tortured by 2 masked Spanish-speaking women who kept her chained in a closet, held her at gunpoint, and branded her. Her husband Keith spoke to ABC News, holding back tears as he described being reunited with his wife.
I just ran past everybody and I, throw open the curtain, and she was there in a bed, in her poor face. And I just hugged her, I just held her.
The investigation for her kidnapper spanned several years, but Sherry's story fell apart in 2020 when investigators connected DNA from her clothing to an old boyfriend who admitted the kidnapping was a hoax.
I don't want you to find her.
We're not going to find her. The DNA came back to James Reyes.
The DNA that was on you belongs to James Reyes.
Sherry pleaded guilty to charges of mail fraud and making false statements. She was sentenced to 1.5 years in prison. Houston teen Rudy Farrier was reported missing by his mother, Janie Santana, in 2015. For 8 years, law enforcement officials, family members, and private investigators looked for Rudy. Then on June 29, 2023, Rudy was found asleep outside a church in Houston, Texas, and taken to the hospital. That's when police realized Rudy was never missing.
During the 8-year time frame where he was missing, investigators followed up on many tips, leads, collected evidence proving that Rudy was not missing during the 8-year period. Many of these facts included contacts and statements with relatives, friends, neighbors, and medical professionals. Rudy was recently identified as having previous HPD interactions, meaning that he made contact with patrol officers out on the street. However, during these contacts, fictitious names and date of births were given, misleading the officers, and Rudy would remain missing. In fact, both Janie, Rudy's mother, and Rudy himself gave fictitious names while interacting with various patrol officers. After investigators talked with him yesterday, it was discovered that Rudy returned home the following day on March 8th, 2015. The mother, Janie, continued to deceive police by remaining adamant that Rudy was still missing. She alleged her nephew was a person friends and family were seen coming and going. However, we disputed that.
Why? Why do they do it? Why on earth do they do it? Joining us tonight in Los Angeles, California, senior reporter for DailyMail.com, the host of Daily Mail Crime on TikTok, and victim advocate for Project Cold Case, Caitlin Becker. Also in Los Angeles, clinical and forensic neuropsychologist and associate professor at Pepperdine University, Dr. Judy Ho. Great to see you both. Caitlin, was it clear at any point in the Jussie Smollett case what happened, why he did it? Because he still doesn't admit that he did it, right?
It's never been clear as to why he did it, why he stuck with his rationale for so long, why he fought it tooth and nail, why he gave that ridiculous interview to Robin Roberts. And as you said, he still maintains his version of the story is the correct version of the story. But the two brothers who the cops figured out were the ones who had attacked him, the second they got into interrogation, they told the truth of the entire story, as they should have. There's no reason these two individuals should have gone down for perpetrating an attack that did not happen. As to why he did it, this was kind of in the height of the Black Lives Matter movement, which of course is still going on to this, to this day. It was in the height of all of those protests amid George Floyd, and actually, I think that might have happened even before that. But I think as you heard him say in his press conference, he didn't want to do anything to upset or offend the movement. And I think it perhaps maybe had something to do with that. But he couldn't back up his story, and it unraveled so quickly that he ended up getting jail time and having to pay a steep fine. Unbelievable.
Dr. Judy Ho, when we look at the why of it, okay, Sherry Papini. This, I mean, I still to this day don't understand why someone would go. I mean, this was super elaborate. I mean, she was all in on that thing. Any idea on why someone would do that?
Well, it's so difficult to know, but one of the most common reasons why somebody would start a fake crime and be a participant in it, and then at one point it just gets bigger and bigger, and it's like at that point they're committed and they can't pull out, even if they start to question themselves and whether or not this is the right thing to do. But oftentimes in the beginning, it starts with a seeking of attention or sympathy. And although that sounds like it's so simplistic, it's not. It's one of those very deep human needs that we have to feel connected to people and to feel like others care about us. And so for some people who initiate a hoax crime, it could be that they're looking for something that they feel like they didn't get. Sometimes they may perceive themselves to be a victim of the system they live in, or they may be an actual victim. They may have had trauma happen to them in the past. And so it doesn't seem like that far-fetched of an idea, but taking on this persona and having all these people pour their resources and their time and being able to watch that, it's somehow personally fulfilling to them. And if there's some other kind of mental illness on top of it that would suggest that they didn't know right from wrong, or maybe they're in a psychotic state, that can make things even more complicated because they may not even be truly conscious of what's going on.
And in the case of Rudy Farias and the mom there, it seems like the mom was getting money from it to a certain extent, and it's still not clear there. So let's dive now into the case of Carlee Russell, because police have come out and said, we can't corroborate anything from her story. So my guess is they're investigating whether or not that is a hoax. And there's a lot of people who believe it has all indications that it may very well be a hoax. Let's take a listen to her 911 call.
Hi, I am on Interstate 459, and there is a kid just walking by themselves. Hold on. Where on 459 are you? I'm right next to the exit 10 by the Hoover Med, like to get off by the Hoover Med. Okay, so you're before the exit? Yes. Okay, and were you headed southbound or northbound? Okay, towards Tuscaloosa or towards 280? Towards Tuscaloosa. Okay, and was the child on the left or right side? On the right side. Were they walking northbound or southbound? They're walking towards Tuscaloosa. Walking southbound? Or how old do they look? Like a toddler, like maybe like 3 or 4.
Did you pull over with them? Are you still with them?
Yes.
Okay, are you with the child right now?
No, I'm not. I didn't get out of the car. I can see them though.
Do you mind staying and keeping an eye on them until we get there?
Yeah. Yeah, sure, yeah.
Okay, what kind of car are you in?
I'm in a red Mercedes-Benz.
Is it a sedan or SUV?
SUV. I mean, it's a sedan. Sorry.
Can you put your hazards on for me?
Yeah, they're on.
Okay. Did you talk to the child at all, or did you say anything to them?
No.
Okay.
No.
Do they look like they're injured?
No, they don't.
Are they white, black, Hispanic, or Asian?
They're white.
Is it male or female?
I think it's a boy, a little boy.
White male? Okay. So is he wearing clothes?
Yes.
Okay. What is he wearing?
It's a white t-shirt, and it doesn't look like he has any pants on. It looks like a diaper.
And you don't see any cars anywhere?
No, no cars anywhere.
Okay. All right. What's your name?
My name is Carlee Russell.
And you don't see any injuries on the child from where you're at, correct?
No, but I can't really see them that good.
Okay, try to keep an eye on them for the best that you can, because I don't want you to lose track of them.
Okay.
All right, and do they have shoes on?
No. Not that I can see. I can't really see that. Look.
Okay. All right, I've got them on the way, okay? Just try to keep an eye on them, but officers are on the way, okay?
Okay, thanks.
Dr. Judy Ho, as I listened to Carlee Russell on that, and the first time I heard it, it was much different than I imagined what it would sound like. What do you hear in her voice, and any thoughts on why a 25-year-old might attempt a sort of elaborate hoax here as well?
Yeah, it can be really tough to say. Obviously, when people are in these situations, when it's actually happening, they could respond in different ways. But a couple of things that I picked up on are that her tone, just her tone of voice and the way that she was speaking was kind of cheerful, a little upbeat given the situation. I think that's kind of a frightening scenario, right? Seeing this child, this little tiny child on the side of the road by themselves completely. There wasn't really urgency in her voice. It actually seemed almost like more of a positively tinted sort of tone as she's talking about this very serious matter. And then also just when answering questions, there were a number of pauses. And again, it's not that people can't be thinking about what they have to say when they say it, but also if you're observing a scene in real time and the child is in front of you, you wouldn't think that there would be so much of thinking, pauses before giving the answer. In terms of her actual intent, it's so hard to know. I don't know what's going on in her head that thought that this would be a good idea. But again, oftentimes for these individuals, there's something that they think needs to be called attention to. Maybe in their mind, they actually think that they're being a martyr of some sort, or they're doing a public good in some way, in some twisted way. It's amazing what human justification can do to a person's mind, and even believing that this was somehow the right thing to do to call attention perhaps to an issue that she thinks deserves some spotlight.
And Caitlin, what was going on in her life at that moment? Was there any sort of drama taking place?
Well, as far as we know, based on what we've gleaned from a lot of her different social media reports and her different social media posts, she was kind of over it with work. She had posted several things to that effect, and it did seem like there was some sort of issue with her boyfriend. She had posted several things alluding to being cheated on, alluding to someone going after a stripper, alluding to someone to sort of seeing someone's true colors. So it seems like there was perhaps some sort of trouble within her relationship, but it is notable that when she quote unquote disappeared, her boyfriend was one of the first people to post all over his social media in an attempt to find who he thought was a girlfriend who was kidnapped. And since then, he's scrubbed his social media of any vestiges of their relationship, including those posts talking about her being potentially kidnapped.
All right, Dr. Judy Ho, I want to thank you for joining us tonight. Appreciate your insight. Caitlin's going to stay with us. When we come back, we're going to talk about investigating a hoax. What's the process of figuring out that, hey, wait a minute, these things aren't necessarily adding up? Plus, coming up next hour. In Long Island, New York, new information tonight related to the accused Gilgo Beach killer. Is there evidence that the killings took place in his house? And is the suspected serial killer connected to another case in South Carolina?
This investigation is still ongoing. The task force will remain intact. We'll continue to search and follow any types of tips that may come in the Crime Stopper hotline or things that we may recover that may lead us in another direction.
Business, accused of killing a man and later dismembering his body.
The details are something out of a terrible nightmare.
Leaving the head of the victim in a bucket.
It is an absolute horror show.
It's a bizarre case that's already seen its share of fireworks.
Business violently attacked her own attorney.
So what is the defense?
Anything is possible when it comes down to a jury trial.
The House of Horrors murder trial. Live coverage begins Monday morning only on Court TV.
That said, it's not an abduction. She asked me to come get her.
No.
I rented a car.
No.
I drove up and picked her up. He passed the polygraph test, Sherry.
If that's not what happened, what did happen, Sherry?
I don't know. No, there's no way. It's James. There's no way. There's no way.
The DNA doesn't lie.
Way. That's Sherry Papini, faked her abduction. That's the moment where she's confronted by investigators, and she now realizes that they know that she made it all up, that she was hanging out with an old boyfriend, getting branded and starving herself, and getting punched in the face. Strange stuff. Strange stuff. Let's take a look at more of Sherry Papini's police interrogation.
You've told us so many truths in this situation. The reason why you can describe the room is because you stayed in the room in the dark for hours, for days on end. The reason why you lost so much weight is because you stopped eating. The reason why you got a rash on your arm is because you cleaned his house. The reason why the brand is because he went to the store, bought the branding tools, and branded you. The reason why your nose was broke is because of a hockey stick.
Unbelievable, right? So how do investigators approach this, and is it dangerous to be skeptical, or should you be skeptical in cases like this? Still with me tonight, senior reporter for thedailymail.com, Caitlin Becker, and joining us, retired FBI Special Agent Bobby Chacon. Bobby, let me start with you. Skepticism is always good, but as an investigator and you have a victim saying I was abducted, do you approach the investigation with a level of skepticism, or how does that work?
No, I don't think, Vinny, not until you get that first monkey wrench that kind of sends you off in that direction. But until then, look, we've all gone into this profession to help people and to especially help victims. And in these types of cases, we have to believe the victim, especially in these things that turn out to be hoaxes are normally that there's not a lot of physical evidence and a lot of eyewitnesses. There's usually just that person's word to go on. And we're very well trained to believe the victim. We want to believe the victim. We want to help get bad guys. That's why we're in this business. And so you always start down the road of believing the victim and tell us what. And then there's one or two things that maybe don't add up, and you try to push through that, and you try to say maybe there's a rational explanation for this, but then there's a third thing and a fourth thing, and then that's when it kicks in. That hair on the back of your neck starts going, hey, wait a minute, do we have a hoax here? But initially, I think we all go in there going, we got to get the bad guy that did this. We need to help this person, and that's just natural. We want to be like that, and we want to do that, and you want to keep that mind on the victim. You want to keep that mind on believing this person is a victim. And ultimately, most of the time, the overwhelming majority of the time, they are a victim. So you always have to keep that in mind.
Absolutely. Caitlin Becker, this was such a huge story. From your perspective, at what moment or what things sort of started to tip the scales in a different direction as to what really happened here? Or was it like all of a sudden, oh my goodness, she made this up?
It really was one of those oh my goodness moments. With a lot of these stories, you have Sherry Papini, Carlee, Rudy Farias. All of these stories became national news when these people were supposedly missing. And I think it's really important to differentiate being skeptical after an alleged victim is found and being skeptical when this person is still missing. It's really dangerous to be skeptical and say, maybe they're not missing, maybe we shouldn't look into it, maybe we shouldn't cover it. From my perspective, I would rather be wrong 9 times out of 10 than not put the attention and the coverage on a story where a victim is actually missing and in harm's way. But then with the case of Sherry Papini, she's found and she has all of these wild accusations about what happened to her when she was missing. She specifically said it was 2 Hispanic women that had held her and she didn't really see their faces and that they had branded her. All of these really crazy accusations. Cops are looking for these 2 women who she apparently fabricated out of midair, and there was DNA. You heard in that segment earlier from this conversation, the DNA doesn't lie. There was male and female DNA that did not belong to Sherry Papini on her body. And when they ran it and they finally got a hit outside of CODIS, because it was not in that national database, it turned out to belong to her ex-boyfriend. And once they talked to the ex-boyfriend, the whole thing falls apart, because when you're gonna perpetrate a hoax like this, you better be sure that all of the people you have involved in your hoax are on board. But really, at the end of it, no one wants to go down for a crime they did not commit. So when this man's DNA pops up on her, of course he's gonna say, wasn't me, she came willingly, because that man's not gonna go to jail for her story.
Makes sense. Let's take a listen now. We'll turn to Carlee Russell and her story. Here's Hoover police talking about the case and describing the story that she told them.
She started when she got out of her vehicle to check on the child. A man came out of the trees and mumbled that he was checking on the baby. She claimed that the man then picked her up and she screamed. She stated he then made her go over a fence. She claims he then forced her into a car, and the next thing she remembers is being in the trailer of an 18-wheeler. She stated that the male was with a female. However, she never saw the female, only hearing her voice. She also told detectives she could hear a baby crying. She told detectives the male had orange hair with a big bald spot on the back. She said she was able to escape the 18-wheeler and fled on foot, only to be captured again and then was put in a car. She claimed she was then blindfolded but was not tied up because the captor said they did not want to leave impressions on her wrists.
Bobby, police down there in Hoover, Alabama, said they haven't been able to verify or corroborate any part of her story. So at what point as an investigator does it turn from we're investigating this abduction to we're investigating a fraudulent a hoax?
Well, for me, it would be when she stops cooperating with the police, when she says, I'm going to do 1 interview and that's it. And that apparently has happened down in Alabama. She stopped talking to the police. That to me, that would put her, in opposition to us. She is now an adversary, and I'm going to approach it like that. And so I'm going to approach trying to disprove her story as much as I can, so we can get it to rest. I mean, the specifics of the story are usually light. And so it's hard to disprove some of these things, but that's what you have to do. You have to go down the road of anything specific and try to disprove that. And the minute they stop cooperating with the police is certainly the minute. If you haven't reached that point already, I would have reached it then.
And Caitlin, it seems that her story, according to police, involves 2 escapes. 2 escapes. She escapes once from the tractor trailer, then is caught again, ends up in a car. There's 2 people. There's a bunch of Cheez-Its. There's a lot of pieces that don't seem to make a whole lot of sense, but has anyone, we know the boyfriend has scrubbed his social media, but has anyone in her circle come forward and said, hey, she's under care, she has some emotional problems or something like that, maybe indicating that there was some sort of breakdown that maybe she had?
Not to that effect. Her family has spoken out since she had returned home and really stood by her story, saying that the reason she was not speaking out and not speaking to police was because she had gone through such a traumatic ordeal and needed some time to process that before she spoke again. But as you just listed there are a lot of moving parts to this story, some very specific details, like an 18-wheeler, a red hair and a bald patch, these Cheez-Its. It just seems like those things you would ultimately be able to verify. I mean, how do you hide an 18-wheeler? That it just seems like if the story isn't true, after a little investigation, it will come out from the police very clearly that this was a hoax. And like I said, this is still under investigation, so we do not know. But there are a lot of details that she threw in there, even down from the 911 call where she said she had her hazards on, she had the kid in her eyesight, but we see from the CCTV camera, the traffic camera, her drive 600 yards down. So like we said earlier this week, how fast is this alleged toddler toddling on the side of the road for her to be able to say this, I still see them in my sights, my hazards are on, I'm looking at them. We actually know at this time she is driving down the street.
Yeah, we're looking at that video, and that's a big part, I think, of this story. Now, obviously, there's a darkness that, you know, maybe the person in the car can see that we can't see from the camera, but it's just the speed at which the car is moving. Wow. All right. We've got more to talk about tonight. Big thank you to Bobby Chacon. I think we lost his signal, but we thank him for coming on tonight. Caitlin's going to stay with us. When we come back, we're going to talk about, well, all right, so what happens to people, right, that have engaged in these hoaxes? Like, do they get in trouble? What are they responsible for? That's next.
These are the cases that captivated the world.
Couldn't keep my life straight.
That demanded our attention.
They were killed by their own children.
That challenged the legal system and ourselves.
How in the world can a mother wait 30 days before reporting her child missing?
These are the trials that became legendary. And now you can relive them all in one place. Court TV Legendary Trials. Go to courttv.com/legendary trials to find out how to watch.
And to be a victim of a hate crime. It is the worst thing that can happen, especially in our country with all our history and all that we're going through now to try to get around some of these issues. Hate crimes are the absolute worst. And I believe that you did damage to real hate crimes, to hate crime victims. There are people that are actual, genuine victims of hate crimes that you did damage to.
That was the judge at the sentencing of Jussie Smollett for his elaborate hoax. Judge was not happy, not happy. As you know, Jussie was alleging a hate crime, that he was attacked because of the color of his skin, because of his sexuality, and that's why he was a victim of this horrific moment with a noose thrown around his neck, bleached, and he was able to fight him off, by the way, I think is what he said. It was all fake. It was all fake, by the way. So here's Jussie Smollett in an extremely memorable moment at his sentencing.
No, I would just like to say to Your Honor that I am not suicidal. That's what I would like to say.
Okay.
I am not suicidal.
Okay.
I am not suicidal. I am innocent, and I am not suicidal. If I did this, then it means that I stuck my fist in the fears of Black Americans in this country for over 400 years and the fears of the LGBTQ community. Your Honor, I respect you and I respect the jury, but I did not do this. And I am not suicidal. And if anything happens to me when I go in there, I did not do it to myself. And you must all know that. I respect you, Your Honor. I respect your decision. Jail time. I am not suicidal.
Okay.
Wow, I remember when that was happening. So what happens here? What happens to these hoaxsters, I guess I'll call them? Sherry Papini, mail fraud, fake false statements, 18 months in prison. 36 months of supervised release. She's got some restitution that she's got to deal with as well. Jussie Smollett, 30 months of probation, 150 days in jail for his false report, disorderly conduct. He's got some restitution going on there, too. Now, Janie Santana, in the case where she reported her son missing, there have been no charges. Still a new case. I presume there's still an investigation going. May or may not ever be any charges there. So, still with me, Caitlin Becker, and also joining us right now in Los Angeles, California, former federal prosecutor Nima Rahmani. All right, Nima, so how does a prosecutor decide what to do in these cases, right? Because it begins, this person is a victim. Then all of a sudden, the tables are turned. They're now accused of you know, this type of fraudulent, false reporting, hoaxes. How should criminal prosecutors deal with them? And what if, in this case, you're talking about Carlee Russell. What if that turns out to be a hoax? Is she facing anything here?
Well, Vinny, the worst thing you know as a prosecutor is to put an innocent person in jail. I mean, that's everyone's nightmare. So whenever there's a false report like this, you have to take it very seriously. And on the federal side, you have a statute that deals with this, making false statements to a police officer, right? That's generally what you use in these types of cases. But the states, they have it too, making a false police report. That's what they prosecuted Jussie Smollett with. And absolutely, you got to go after these cases very aggressively. You know, Sherry Papini's case, not only did she file this false police report, the FBI got involved, she actually took money from the California Victim Compensation Fund. So we talked about the time and the resources that are used to investigate these fake crimes, but she actually took money from folks that are real victims. And of course, in Smollett's case, he pushed the case to trial, was convicted, and still didn't accept responsibility. So, I mean, these are two who should be prosecuted. You know, Carlee Russell's case, I expect the same thing to happen. I mean, here's someone that took a lot of the public's time, law enforcement time, and she should face charges. There's got to be consequences for these types of actions, because otherwise, you know, they're going to continue.
Caitlin Becker, have we heard anything from law enforcement in either the case of Rudy Farris's mom, Janie Santana, or in the case of Carlee Russell?
Both of those investigations are ongoing, so no charges have been filed yet, and there's no indication that any will be in the near future. However, in the case of Janie Santana, we're not only looking at those charges about filing the false police report and pretending that her son was missing when he wasn't for all of those years and wasting police resources, but we also have an issue of her getting paid from a GoFundMe more than $2,000 that was earmarked to take care of this woman who was searching for her son. Now, we know that she was paid that because GoFundMe confirmed that that money was paid out to her under false pretenses. But in addition to that, there were several in-person fundraisers that had been held over the time that this child was supposedly in the wind and AWOL. And I don't know how much money she purportedly took home from those in-person fundraisers, but we do know that those happened. We do know that there was money raised, and we do know that she took it. So she's looking at potentially additional charges because of that. And the police in Texas have said that those potential issues are wrapped up in their current investigation. So they are not only looking into the false missing persons report as well as those financial issues.
Nima, I'm thinking back now how surprised I was that the Jussie Smollett case actually went to trial, right? Usually, I guess in most of these cases, once the hoax has been, you know, unveiled and revealed, it's kind of the game over. But Jussie sort of stuck to it, and I think to this day still is very defiant in admitting that it was a hoax.
Well, Vinny, this is a special type of criminal defendant, right? These are narcissists. These are liars, right? Sometimes they do it for the money, but oftentimes they do it for the attention, and they, you know, want sympathy. And, you know, once they go down that path of lying, they're going to stick to their story. Imagine someone like Jussie Smollett. Why did he do this? Because he wanted more money from the show that he was on, Empire. He thought he wasn't being treated, even though he was making tens of thousands of dollars per episode, you know? Think of how many people in this country would love to have an opportunity like he did. You know, but again, these are people, whether it's social media, whether it's traditional media, you know, we're seeing a lot more of this. And I don't know what Carlee Russell's motivation was, but if you're looking at her social media, she's someone that thought she was being treated unfairly, maybe at work by her boyfriend, and this was you know, some way to get attention. for Santana, obviously she had a very sort of different relationship with her son, and we don't know if he's a dependent adult and some of the allegations of drug abuse and sexual abuse are true or not, but those may be additional charges in addition to all the fraud that Caitlin mentioned as well.
And Caitlin, the other part of this is, you know, the world we live in now, social media. When someone goes missing or someone's been abducted, a lot of these cases get a lot of attention. And in Carlee Russell's case, I mean, it became a very big story very quickly. And then when things turn, there's a sense of outrage and anger from the public.
Well, yeah, the public feels like their time has been wasted and that they've been duped. No one wants to feel duped and taken advantage of. And there is such an influx of information constantly coming at us. I mean, at dailymail.com right now, I couldn't tell you how many news stories we have on the website and how quickly they are changing. So for people to take time out of their day to spend caring and being concerned about someone who is not actually a victim, people feel annoyed. And people, on the whole, yes, there's a lot of terrible things that go on, but on the whole, people have good hearts and they want to donate to GoFundMe's and they want to repost to find this person, and they feel like there's a little bit that they can do to potentially help. And then you kind of feel like an idiot when you find out that this thing wasn't what you thought it was. And it really does, I think, ultimately come down to attention. Why do 5, 6, 7-year-olds pack up their backpack with snacks and PJs and run away from home down the street? Usually because they feel like they were wronged by their parents or their siblings in some innocuous way, and then they turn around and come home. This is a really intense adult version of that.
Nima, how important is the why of it in determining what the punishment should be and what prosecutors should seek, whether there's, you know, because these aren't murder cases, right? And I think the threshold is always, do they deserve time behind bars or not for, you know, coming up with these hoaxes?
I think the why does matter, Vinny. I mean, and any criminal defendant, right? I mean, there's certain things you can't come back from, but I think a judge is going to know, why did someone do this? Was it because of some mental health issue, right? You know, for someone like Farias, I mean, that why is going to be very different from someone like Russell. So the why does matter. And what's their response? Do they try to make amends for it? Do they come clean? Are they making restitution, right? You know, paying back law enforcement, prosecutors for the time they spent on the case. It can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. Look at the city of Chicago on the Smollett case. So I think it absolutely is an important question. And if someone's just going to sort of maintain that innocence, you know, persist in those lies, they have a constitutional right to push the case to trial like Smollett did. But if you do, don't be asking for a discount. Don't be asking for a break or any sympathy or accommodation from the judge when you do so.
But ironically, Papini, who ended up admitting it, got more time than Jussie, who fought it all the way. Sometimes things work out a little funny.
Well, the feds, Vinny, you know
That's
how
right.
the feds do
Feds
things.
don't mess around. Nima Romani, thank you so much. Great to see you tonight. And Caitlin Becker, awesome as always. DailyMail.com, senior reporter. We'll see you again really, really soon.